Welcome back to another episode of the Bench Mob ENT podcast, the best sports podcast in New Jersey. We got another episode of Do You Know Your Team with none other than Tanya Hayles. How are you doing today?
I am good. I am good. I'm repping NBA Thread Squad Community Team Best Team, so I'm happy to be here.
Team best team. And while we at it, before we even get into the episode, make sure that you guys check out the Event Bestie podcast. She is the host. She's been doing it for a minute. Not the pod, but the business that she's talking about with the creativity aspect with designing and event planning. She's been doing it for a while. She's been doing the social media thing for a while and knows it very well. So definitely check her out. Threads, the pod, Instagram. I don't think she'd be on TikTok or nothing like that,
No,
but
no. My bio on TikTok is literally I'm just here to watch the videos people send me in group chats. I'm not.
so don't go over to TikTok. But
Don't
definitely
follow me on TikTok.
definitely threads for sure. You are a Toronto's Raptors fan.
I
So
am.
I forgot to do it with Dodger and Dallas, aka Varnell, because I'm trying to do a better job of not reading my notes
Okay.
and giving people eye contact. So we're gonna start off the episode a little different.
Oh no.
Give me your favorite Raptors of all time.
Yes, so that was one of the questions. My top 5 Raptors of all time. I have to start with the point guard, Kyle Lowry. I think it's and some of the things of what makes them my favorites are also off the court things. Kyle
Mhm.
really was integrated into the community. He has 2 kids, so they were. I don't think they were born here, but he definitely raised them. They went to school here and participated. I'd have to say Chris Bosch. I'd have to say JYD, Junkyard Dog. Like I gotta go old school there a little bit. Um, Jamal McGuire, he's actually a friend of mine, which is very bizarre. And he was also a coach at one point in time. And then my last but not least, I don't, that one is really hard for me to pick because
Mhm.
I think that um there's been so many eras of Raptors,
Mhm.
and so I think it sometimes depends on the Raptor itself, but I would say it's I that that final slot is really difficult. There's Demar in there, Mighty Mouse, but I gotta end with our very first Hall of Famer, Vince Carter.
Ain't nothing wrong with that list at all. Doing my research on it because obviously I know of the Raptors, but I don't know in depth history.
Yeah,
Y'all have had a lot of good players from the beginning of its
so
existence
listen,
to
yes.
now. So I know when I ask you guys this question, it's kind of difficult to ask y'all to pick five.
Hmm.
But that list is solid right there. I don't see anything wrong with that. You mentioned Demar. I wanted to ask your opinion, being that you're in the country, you've been a fan. You mentioned some classic names right there. So you probably gonna kill the trivia because you just mentioned Mighty
I
Mouse and Jamal
I will
McGill.
not kill the trivia, just letting you know.
You mentioned Junkyard Dog. So you mentioned some names that's in
Yep,
the archives right there.
I did.
For you, right? I always find it interesting. You guys got the championship when Kawhi came. Do you feel if Demar stayed and you guys didn't get Kawhi, that eventually you guys would have got a ring?
Yes. I feel really strongly about that. I think because here's the thing about the Toronto Raptors. I'm going to give you a little bit of history and I'm going to hijack your podcast a little bit. So we're 30 years old. We turned 30 this year. And so that's another reason why the Vince Carter thing was a really big deal for the team and for the city. And when we started, we were playing in Rogers Center, which is where the Toronto Blue Jays play, which is the baseball team. So think about trying to fit a basketball court in a baseball stadium. Like it's just it
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't make any sense and it's weird. You used to be able to get like $13 tickets. They weren't loved. But what the most important thing was, players didn't want to come here. They felt like it was being shipped off to Siberia. It's a whole other country. It's cold. So our early era is players not wanting to be here. And what's very funny now is seeing the globalization of the league and how a lot of the top talent is not from the US. We were early adopters of that, right? We had Andrea Bargnani, we had Jose Calderon, right? Like we had all these European players because they were the ones who wanted to come here, but also when they came here, they found community here. Toronto is very much like a smaller, cleaner version of New York City. The whole world is here. I can go from getting a shawarma from Persia to Jamaican food to there's a little India, right? Like you name the country, they have a street and an area where they have community here. And that is also part of why we were able to recruit European players a lot. But when you're a fan of the team, you're not winning because no one wants to be here, no one wants to stay here. And so when I talk about my top five, it's players who actually want to be here. Asterisk with Vince, understandably, there was some there's a lot there. We don't have enough
We
time
know.
for that. So I think for me, it's just like when we really think about the eras of Raptors, it's who wanted to stay. And Demar wanted to stay, Pascal wanted to stay. OG was surprised by the trade, right? Like there was a lot of players who we are not used to as Raptors fans. If you're an OG Raptors fans, players wanting to stay. So long story less long, yes, I think that because we had that nucleus of Kyle and Demar, um, Mark, like we just had really good players that I think that we would have gone really deep into, and we were making the playoffs consistently. I think people forget that we were like this is a desert era of Raptors, but up until like 2020 basically we were in the playoffs consistently for like 10 years. So I think people need to put a little bit of respect on my city and my country's name, please and thank you. No, people like to like, oh well, if they weren't injured, they Raptors wouldn't have won. I'm just like, that's the sport, that's the game. You have to
Yes.
play with the five fellas on the court regardless. You got to step up. If your bench can't step up and beat the team that's across the border, then you lose. And they lost and we won. And I love it for me.
I completely agree though. Like I think a lot of people forget the context of it. It's one of those errors where same in the '90s with Jordan. It's a lot of teams that were really good, but then you had to see Chicago Bulls and Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen and Phil Jackson. You guys kept running up against the LeBron James led Cleveland team that in that era he had like 10 straight finals runs. They weren't booty. It wasn't like they sucked.
Yeah.
You just had to see LeBron year
Right.
after year after year, and he would have astronomical, crazy games where it's the known as the Toronto game where he had 7 fadeaways.
Yeah.
You can't predict that. You can't
You
control.
really can't. And I think like, and people like tease us and call us LeBronto and all this stuff. I'm just like, but that's what the NBA is. There's always an era of a player that changes literally the game. That was like you said, that was Jordan in the 90s and then it became LeBron. And in order to to progress and get past a certain era, a certain team, like there was always one team, one player that was like your Achilles heel, right? And
Mhm.
then like he left Cleveland, then he went to Miami. Like he didn't go far. He went down 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 the 66 or whatever the highway is, and I'm just like, you couldn't have just and then people are just like, oh, you wouldn't have won if you was still in the Eastern Conference. I'm just like, but you can't play if this then that in the NBA, right? Like you have to play the game, and if the game is played right and you have a good core and a good team of leaders who are hungry, who have something to prove. I think Kawhi was playing with a chip on his shoulder, and I
Mhm.
appreciate it because he was just like, yeah, no, like let's he's very efficient and I love that. He's just like, I'm in, we're gonna get this ring and then I'm gonna be out. I'm just like, you know what? I'm not mad. I'm
Respect it.
not I'm not upset about it, to be wholly honest.
And you mentioned earlier, and we'll get into some of the trivia, but you mentioned the community there. I've never been yet because I said it on threads to somebody that's in Canada also. And I was like, I went to Niagara Falls, drove straight from Jersey, right? So I'm like, yeah, when we get there, we go to Toronto too. I put in the GPS. I was like, dang, that ain't around the, it's not around the
Like
corner.
that's another like hour and a half drive. Yes.
Not around the corner. And coming from Jersey, that was like 13, 14. I was like,
Yeah.
I don't know about that one. But a bunch of food shows and travel shows I watch. Toronto is my favorite city that I've never been to because of what you mentioned with the community.
Yeah.
Literally, like that's one of the things that is promoted and so loved about Toronto. Watching the travel shows and the Food Network shows. It was a Food Network show where it was legit, like you said, they had basically every part of the country. You could go find out and taste it there.
Yeah.
Some of the best rated restaurants in the world are in Toronto,
Yeah.
no matter what the culture is. So shout out Toronto. Put respect on Toronto. I'm gonna get there at some point.
Just come visit us in the summer. I think, like, as a person who lives here, and everyone's just like, "Oh, Canada's so cold." I'm just like, "Okay, guys, let's do some geography here." The other day, Buffalo had 9,000 feet of snow. I am 2 hours away from Buffalo, and I was like, it was crickets, and Toronto was green, right? I'm this like, lake lakes matter. Science matters, right? Do we get cold? For sure. But are we colder than Buffalo? Not necessarily. Do we get more snow than Buffalo? Not necessarily. And also climate change is real, so like that's
Yes.
also part of the problem. But I would say that, yeah, I mean, summer in Toronto, the vibes are unmatched because everyone is just excited to be outside. There's not a lack of, there'll be Taste of Little India, there'll be Taste of Little Italy, there'll be Jerk Fest, there'll be Afro Fest. I'm just like, I eat my way through the globe in the summer. I mean, you can do it in the winter, but it's more fun when you're outside in the sunshine. So definitely, Destination Toronto is not paying me for this. They should. But yeah, I think that and there's a really rich culture and history. Like, when you are the only, and players have said this, when you are the only team in the whole country, you feel the country behind you, right? Because what happens is the Raptors, for preseason and training camps, they do it in other parts of the country. So they've done Vancouver, they've done Montreal, I think they've done Edmonton as well. And so other parts of Canada get to support Canada's team. And, you don't get that love when you're a Knicks fan. Like, yes, of course, like Knicks fans travel, but it's very, very different when you are the whole. Let me tell you something about that parade. I promise you, the entire city of Toronto was there. It was insane. Now, from an event planner standpoint, it was terribly planned, but we won't talk about that. But I say that to say, I'm just like, you could rob every single house in Toronto right now, and no one will be home because everybody and their grandmother and their children are. And like, I pulled my son out of school to go. Like, it was pure insanity. But also thinking about the people who flew in, who weren't just Toronto residents. Like, that was probably one of the biggest parades that the NBA will ever see, only because
Mm,
of the entire country being behind the team, because there's no other options. Although, like, there's some people in Vancouver, they migrated to being Memphis fans because that's the
yeah.
Grizzlies. And then, when they do the throwbacks, which, behind the Raptors dinos, the Grizzly throwbacks are like two of the best throwbacks in the history of the throwbacks. So,
Wow.
I think like there's more to Toronto Raptors and Toronto than just being this place that no one wants to be and no one wants to go. And um, if you pay attention and you kind of go outside your American lens, which a lot of Americans tend to do, and hear what the players have to say about being here and playing here. Um, they usually have positive things to say, and it's because of the culture and the community, and that matters, right? These players, they don't just go to work, they live here. They gotta shop here and eat here. If they have kids, they have to, like, in the championship run, like, Fred's wife was pregnant. I think it was like the semifinals, and he was just like, they had to play a game. He had to, like, he hopped on a plane to I think Indiana or wherever he was residing. She gave birth, hooray! And then he had to like fly back. Like, you know what I mean? Like they're real human beings. And I think that that was the thing that I loved being up close and personal when I worked there, is getting to know them as humans. And, like they have interests. They get bored, they get tired, like they're humans. They're not just athletes who, okay, they lock in and they don't live in Scotiabank Arena.
Nah, I think that's huge and something that people forget oftentimes that humans are they're still regular people like us. Like their bank accounts may look different, but
Yes.
outside of that, they still, like you said, they have interests, they have families, they have things that they want to do. Like that goes. A lot of people don't think it does, but that factors into where players actually go on free agency often.
1000%. Yeah, 1000%. I mean, and especially like the more kids you have, like Giannis moving from um the Bucks would be huge. He's got 4 kids. So 4 kids that know he knows the school system and the tax rate and all these things. Like, the great thing. So fun fact, I used to work for MLSC. MLSC is Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment, which owns the Raptors and the Leafs and the MLS team and the CFL team. They own a lot of things, guys. And so getting to talk with the staff on the Raptors who was responsible for all this stuff, player development, and helping them get set up in a new house or a new place. And okay, how many kids do you have? Do you want them in French immersion? Like, do you want a Catholic school? Like all these things, right? Because when you're moving to a new city, that's still things that you have to think about. And then you have to move to a whole new country. The grades might not match. Like it really depends on the age of the kids. So I think it's really, when people talk about, I said this the other day on Threads when Dennis Schroeder got traded again. And I'm just like, poor guy. Like, and everyone's just like, oh, he's rich. It doesn't matter. And I'm just like, but maybe it does, like 8 teams in, I don't know how many years, like 10 years or whatever it
Mhm.
is. Like, that's really difficult. That puts a weight on you. You can't just lay your head down and know that you're waking up staying in that city. How do you put down roots? How do you feel good about, having breakfast and going to practice when you don't know that the people that you're getting to know are going to be people that you're going to be talking to tomorrow? It's a whole new set of staff. There's a lot of people who work for a basketball team, y'all. Like a lot, right? There's so many people that are not seen, um that work for a basketball team, and so getting to know all those people only to be traded, like, and then consistently, I feel bad for him, and I'm just like, no player wants that. They want to play the game and he gets to do that. But I think there's something about, making a home, and I think that that's why, the OG and Pascal trades hit me hard because I was working there at the time, and I love OG. Like OG's sense of humor, I always forget that he's British. Because I'm just like, wait, hold on a second. Because when you're talking to him, that's like, right, you're a whole Brit. And so his humor is very dry. The whole thing with like him and scarves and oh my gosh, I'm forgetting his name. I see his face. Serge Ibaka and the whole like
Yeah.
battle of like, I put you on scarves. Like that is like a classic Canadian heritage moment. Like I loved him. And so waking up in the Christmas holidays actually was like this time last year. And I was like getting text messages and they're like, do you have his face anywhere? And I'm like, what? Wait, what? And like I'm freaking out. I gotta call people. It's Christmas holidays. Like that's the other thing that people don't see. Like when these things happen, like the next time I was in office, his face was peeled off of elevators, right? Like you, because we don't have the rights to his face anymore. So we can't have his face on a billboard outside. And, all these things. And I'm just like, oh, but Pascal was like, I cried because he cried. And I'm just like, now we're out here crying in the club. And, you know, it's just it's just that. Anyways, I digress, but that's what I'm here for, to talk all things Raptors and
Of
give people
course, no. I
things.
appreciate having an insight on some of these stories because I think is key and vital on a couple things you mentioned. Like, there's a lot that goes into. a team being successful more than just the coaches and the players. That, and I appreciate the Steve Kerrs of the world, the Greg Popovichs of the world that shout out the person that got to change the jerseys every day, the person that
Mhm.
got to wash the sneakers, the person that got to, oh, I got to go get the food orders. Like you mentioned, hey, I got to get you set up. You don't know this area. Do what type of school do you want your kids in? Do you want them in school? Are you going to homeschool them? There's a lot that goes on behind the scenes that those people don't often get a thank you for. But shout out to those organizations. Like when the Raptors do win, hey, I'm gonna make sure every single person in the organization, y'all all get a ring, y'all all get a thank you, y'all all get some type of money like what Dame did.
Yeah.
He won the money, and of course, he probably could have spent it on something. His kids, he could
Yep.
have spent it on anything, and he said, "No, I'm gonna give it to the staffers that work for the
Yep.
Bucks." That type of stuff, I think, is huge and important for people to remember. That aspect and the aspect of, hey, no, these are humans.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, of course you get to play the game that you love, but if people pay attention, because everybody wants to listen to podcasts and listen to interviews and stuff, listen to the podcasts and the interviews in full of those players that's been traded 9, 10 times, 11, 12 times.
Mhm.
Players that have played 16 years and played on 13 different teams.
Yeah.
Some, it's okay because they're in a situation where like, I'm single, I didn't have much to do, it was not much movement. But if you got a wife, if you got kids, that's a completely different factor.
Yeah.
Everybody doesn't handle it the same. And I saw when we put that on threads and I was like looking at the comments and I'm like, yo, this is one of my OGs told me you can't talk basketball with everybody. And that wasn't even a basketball thing on the court. That was just a life thing. Like,
Yeah. Yeah, and
look,
I think for me, like, yeah, I mean, listen, I have a very unique position. Not everyone who talks basketball has had the ability to, you know, be in it. Most people when they're in a basketball arena, it's full of other people. I used to run those stairs during meetings or have like impromptu. I was using it as like my gym. I was just like, okay, I'm not going to the gym, but there's a ton
that's
of
smart.
stairs and there's a ton of space, and I'm inside. So I'm gonna take a half an hour and I'm start courtside and I'm gonna work my way up to the 300s. It was great. So I recognize that there are folks and there's things that like, you know, it's really it's funny because like when you're in it, you're just like, okay, you're supposed to like act like you've been there before and not be like you don't ask for autographs. Like that's the rule number one. You don't act like a fan when you're there because you're an employee. And they have an expectation of protection when they're around you, right? Like, okay, you're safe because you work here and you gotta act like you have sense
Yeah.
because you don't want to unsecure your paycheck, which is really key. But when you're, getting to do things with them in the community, and stuff like that, and you end up like, acting, or just end up having lunch. One day I was at OVO, which is where the Raptors practice, and I was just there to hang out with one of my colleagues and do some work from there that day. And then like one of the players who was injured was in the place. So he just sat down. I'm just like, why am I having lunch with our center? This is random. I'm like, okay. That's when I learned that Jakob Pertl has a basketball game where like you can like it's I forget what it's called. I'll get it to you later. But I was just like, what is happening? And sometimes you're just like, is this real life? This is real life. Like the Raptor chefs are cooking me lunch and I'm just sitting here having lunch with the Raptors. Okay, that's fine. Or like I'd be in my office and then like the actual Raptor would walk by. And I'm just like, what in the it's like 2 o'clock in the afternoon. What in the world? Like it's a weird world to be in. And I know everyone wants in and everyone wants access, but when you're in it, like it is work, right? Like game ops is a whole like that is a lot of work. All those games, the national anthem, the dancers, the what goes on the jumbotron, that's always a battle. The partners and all the different things. Like there's so much that goes into giving you the product that is the NBA. And I think that people forget that like it is a workplace, it's a work environment, right? And when people just like, "Oh, I pay your salary." I'm just like, "No, no, you don't. you you do not. You don't. I promise you you do not." Right? Your courtside ticket sales did not contribute to LeBron's salary. I need people to stop it. Okay, because if those tickets didn't sell, LeBron still gets paid. So
Yes.
I need everyone to take a step back, turn their entitlement down a notch. They're not a public servant. Like, they are a contractor to a multi-billion-dollar entity who, and they're the product that is also being sold, right? Like, so I just, sorry, I'm digressing a lot, but I have these things to get off my chest, and I'm
Hey,
very happy that I have this space to do it.
this is the space to do it. I'm glad you're doing it. This is actually one of my favorite episodes now of the series of Do You Know Your Team, because it's getting the more of the insight level. Of course, it's fun to do the trivia and stuff like that. But me being a fan of the game, I don't know, I've always been interested in stuff like this, the background stuff. Like,
Mm,
I would get 2K and I'd play the game, but I would like to do the franchise mode to do all those things behind the scenes. Like,
mm,
oh, are we going to change the ticket prices? Are we going to do this? Are we going to actually trade this player? Does the money match up? I don't know why, but I've always been interested in things like that and
yeah.
how it runs and the history of the game. Even though, like, I was supposed to do, you know, honors history, but I didn't apply myself in school, so I didn't want to do it. Like, the only honors classes I took was lunch and gym, so yeah, so
Not lunch and gym. I mean, listen, physical fitness and health are really important. So there's that. Yeah, I think ultimately, what it boils down to is, there's however many teams in the league, and every single one of them has their own story, um, and histories. And it takes a lot of people, more than just who you see on the court at any given time or who you see on the sidelines on any given time, to make it happen. And I think my biggest thing that I always want people to take away is, as I said, one, that they're human. It takes a village, man. Like, the village is large. Not as large as people think, though. Like, when I say that the team is big, like, yes, there's a lot of people, but then there's also not a lot of people. So people are out here doing a lot of work. And the thing about MLSC, because there's four sports teams, like, you are, I mean, if you work for the Raptors proper, then that's it, that's your lane, and you don't have to care about anything. But there's a lot of people at the head office. You're either team red, team blue, or team black. So team red is the Raptors and the soccer team, and then team blue is the football and the hockey team, and team black is your across all verticals. So I'm just like, some of the people who are working on the Raptors during Raptor season also then have to, in February, transition to a whole other sport, right? Like, it's a lot over there. It's a lot. So those are the kinds of things that, like, and there's a lot of other teams in the US that share ownership of other team sports, right? There are a couple of teams that have, like, they own their WNBA counterpart, or they own their MLS counterpart. I don't think there's a lot of crossover in terms of NBA and NFL, because that's just
yeah.
really, really big. But so yeah, like, really just like, when you see the people and when you see something. And also, sorry, my last big beef, these are not interns running the social media accounts. Stop calling them interns. They're not interns. Okay. There are teams behind these teams,
Yes.
and marketing is a very large aspect of the team. It is probably the biggest department of MLSE. So under that falls socials, and there's people who do graphics, then there's people who are posting, and then there's
Yes.
people who are on site. Like, media day. Media day was one of my favorite things to get to experience, because I was just like, okay, what's going on? And that was my first time really getting to interact with the players off court, right? They all have to be there, because that's when you're getting your official NBA head. It's like school picture day,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah,
You're
yeah.
getting all
First
your
day of
official
school.
pictures, you're doing your little vignettes for when they have your face on the screen, right? And that, again, that is a really big production. It's a full day. And I think the last year, I think, like, Dennis had just been traded and he was coming from Germany and he couldn't make it. And they were like, there's so many moving parts all those games that you see, like all those little ad libs and stuff like that. You got to come up with it. I was there representing the foundation. I'm just like, okay, put the hoodie on for the children. And the first year I went, I only took 2 hoodies. And then one of the players is like, can I keep it? And I'm like, but I only have 2. And then another player was like, can I keep it? And I'm like, and it was Delano, and he's from Toronto. And I'm just like, I'm like, okay, you can keep it, but if you wear it, you have to tag the foundation. He's like, okay, I got you. I got you. Me bullying this NBA player. Hilarious. So the next year I got a little smarter. I'm just like, okay, I'm going to bring a whole bunch of hoodies. And I'm just like, just while you're waiting, you got some downtime. I'm just like, put the hoodie on for the children and change the game. And then, yes. And getting to talk with them. And of course, like if you're not the star, like any attention, feels good. So I'm just like, hey, like, whatever, take this. Is it your size? Hopefully, whatever. Also, the bigger the size doesn't necessarily mean the longer the length. They all went for the
Yes.
XLs, and I was just like, what? That's not what I was
Yes.
expecting. So I had a whole bunch of sizes that were too big. These are small, random little things that were never going to be covered in your trivia, by the way, Tom. So just I feel like I've nailed trivia because I'm asking the questions and giving answers.
Okay, so speaking of the trivia, starting
Okay.
off with this one. Who scored the first points in Toronto Raptors history? Now, this is going to be multiple choice.
Oh, thank God.
Was it Alvin Robertson, Sharon Wright, or Damon Stoudemire?
C.
No, it was not
It was Alvin.
Damon Stoudemire. It was Alvin Robertson. He hit a 3-pointer the first
Yeah.
game of the history of the Toronto Raptors.
And the thing is, that was. Do you see how I knew? But I was just like, oh, but maybe it was Damon. I'm gonna do terribly on this, by the way. Just so we're clear.
I think you got this one because you already mentioned it low key.
Okay.
When you mentioned it, I was like, "Dag, she probably gonna get this one." What year were the Raptors founded?
Ooh, 1995.
Yeah, I had that as multiple choice, but I'm like, nah, she don't need a multiple choice. You
No,
just
I don't know. Listen, there's a lot of. We were talking about 30th year for a minute, like starting last year. So I knew it was coming.
yeah. What you said 30. That's all. Yeah, she don't need multiple choice for that one. She
Nope.
got one. Most points scored by a Raptors rookie is 48. Which player had a 48-point game as a rookie? Was it T Mac, DeMar DeRozan, or Charlie Villanueva?
Oh, that's such a throwback, Charlie Villanueva. I'm gonna go with. Sorry, who are my options? Demar, Charlie, or who?
T Mac.
Ooh. Hmm. I'm gonna go with Demar.
I thought you was going with it at the beginning, and then you said throwback. You had it. I thought you were saying Charlie was your answer because Charlie did it as a rookie.
Dang. I just also want to insert that I feel like if T Mac and Vince had been able to stay together longer, we might not necessarily had a ring earlier, but we would have gotten deeper into the playoffs earlier. Because like your literal cousin, like that's just the storyline is just too good and the camaraderie, like you can't get any more of a deeper bond than actual family on the court. I just want to say that for the record.
That's definitely one of my biggest what ifs. Like, if they
Yes.
stayed together, what would have happened?
Yep.
Especially, you saw they were starting to grow individually, and then it just, I wasn't a Raptors fan, obviously, but I know it hit a little harder seeing them go elsewhere and then completely flourish when they could have did that in a Toronto Raptors jersey.
It's the story of our lives as Raptor fans. Okay, so now I'm 1 for 3. Oh gosh, told you I wasn't gonna do well. Terrible.
First Toronto Raptor player to score 50 points in a playoff game.
Okay.
Vince Carter, DeMar DeRozan, Kyle Lowry.
Kyle?
Vince was the first to do it.
Because I was just like, I was thinking of like the in my mind,
Hmm.
Shadow Temptations. I thought I was thinking about like the graduation game, and I was just like,
Mm.
was that 50? Because I know like he went off, but oh man, terrible.
Vince was the first to do it. The
Yes,
first to do it. Last of the trivia, I
terrible.
think you're going to get this one. The all-time leader in points for the Toronto Raptors.
Is it multiple choice?
I can give you multiple choice.
I'm like, I'm waiting for my options. I think
DeMar
I know who it
DeRozan,
is, but oh gosh, now I'm scared.
DeMar DeRozan,
Hmm.
Vince Carter,
Uh-huh.
Damon Stoudemire.
What's the question?
All-time points leader.
Points leader.
Yes, in the franchise history, the most points scored in a Raptors jersey. You know this one. You know this one.
Demar, Damon, or Vince? Those are my
Mhm.
options?
Yeah.
Really should have done some Googling before I came on this podcast. Demar doesn't seem right because he wasn't there long enough. And not, is it Vince? No, it's Demar.
It's
It
DeMar.
is Demar. Wow. I really didn't realize that, to be wholly honest, because if you had given me, if you had thrown Kyle in there, I would have been like, oh, Kyle, gotta be right, because your point guard, you do a lot of things. That's really surprising to me, to be wholly honest.
Yes, if I remember correctly, I think Vince was third all time,
Mm.
but I think DeMar, I forgot the amount of years he was there, but he's first all time right now in points for the Raptors.
See, and now I'm gonna go on another tangent. Y'all are just gonna have to follow me. So here's that's what also bothers me about how Aubrey decided to be during the Vince Carter game, because
Yes.
let's just be really, really clear about the situation. I'm just like, DeMar was a player for the Toronto Raptors and loved being a Toronto Raptor and poured into being here and wanted to stay here. And now learning that he's literally the leading scorer for the Raptors all time, considering who we've had, right? Like, let's think about the people who have played here, and for him to be one of our, the top 10 Raptors of all time. um I really, I'm just like, I don't rock with, just for the also the record, not all of Toronto is team Aubrey. I'm fully team Kendrick, so let's just be wholly clear. um and I can be that now that I'm no longer an employee. Because the association with the Raptors and Drake as an ambassador is it's very tight. And let's just say there's people who are clearly team Drake over there. I am not one of those people. I That was so disrespectful, because I'm just like, if there ever comes a point where we're retiring other jerseys, like Kyle has already said, he's coming back to retire as a Raptor, and I will weep big salty tears when that happens, because that's so, he poured so much into the city, and if it ever does happen for Demar at the end of his career, he will deserve it. um I maintain that he should have gotten an honorary ring, right? Because you don't you don't build a team that gets to the finals without being on a team that got to the semifinals and the quarterfinals and
Hmm.
consistently in the playoffs. Um and so for me, yeah, I just, no, no weapons formed against DeMar DeRozan shall prosper. Not on my watch. Or
So
Kendrick's, apparently.
normally the episode is called "Do You Know Your Team," but I like that title so much better. No weapons formed against the Mars shall prosper. I might have to switch it up. I love that title so much.
Yes. And
So
people will be like,
Demar, right?
wait, from a Toronto fan? I'll be like, yes. P.S. Yes. He's one of those players, regardless of where he goes, I'm always going to root for him. Um, he's just a good human being. And again, when someone, it's like a relationship. When someone chooses you, the relationship just hits different,
Mm,
right? And so
yes.
when players chose Toronto, not just for the money, I don't even know how that all works with the exchange rate and the taxes and the whatnots. Shout out to the accountants. But when someone actually chose to be here, like that's why they're loved. When you talk to random Raptors fans on the streets, like when they pick their favorites, they pick the ones who wanted to be here. Yes, there was a lot back and forth with Vince and how it ended, and there's some people who are salty, but those people don't know how much went into that game, that retirement game. If people knew
Mm,
how much went into making that happen, and I don't mean logistically, I mean emotionally. I I wish I could tell the story, but it's not my story to tell. But let's just say like it took a lot and on both sides and so many parties, people who are not even part of the MLSE family and the Raptors family anymore. So I think like it's really important that matters. I think like when I think about like, Giannis and the Bucks, like and now Dame, right? Like big stars don't go to mid-market teams,
mhm.
right? And there was that era of building super teams, and everyone's going to go to Lakers and they're going to win. And then when they realize that's not how teams are built, you can build a team on paper or in EA Sports, but when it comes down to it, you have to play a gajillion games together. You have to travel on the road together. You have to come together. They're in the practice facilities in the summer, right? So like they're not off. They have some time, depending on obviously when their postseason ends, if they get to the postseason. But um, there was one time I was like walking around. It's like middle of the summer, and I'm just like, why is Grady just walking around? And I'm just like, don't you have someplace to be? But then I realized I'm just like, it's also the summer and you have to be at practice. So yeah, I think really there's players that I will always have a soft spot for. Um, Kyle obviously, Demar definitely, and other ones that I think that um like even like Jose, when he comes back, he gets love. Like if you're an OG Raptors fan, like the ones who stayed for more than a year or really integrated themselves into the community, they'll always make those people's greatest Raptors of all time.
So, to give the context, DeMar has 13,296 points.
Okay.
You would have been right in guessing Kyle Lowry. He's number two all
Mm,
time with 10,540 points. Third is Chris Bosh. Fourth is Vince Carter. And Pascal is fifth.
okay. That makes all that makes sense to me. Demar throws me off a little bit, but I that top five makes sense.
Yeah, DeMar, you saw it up and close and personal. Consistent.
Yeah.
Points add up when you averaging 25 dang near every game.
Right.
You can pencil it in 25, 8 and 5. Pencil
Yeah.
it in 25, 8 and 5.
Yeah.
I'm gonna give you 8 mid-range jump shots. I'm gonna give you a couple fadeaways, up and unders. You could pencil it in. That's what
Yeah.
I like about DeMar, one of the most consistent
Yeah.
players. You know what you're getting. And shout out to him for the series he started talking about mental health
1000%.
for players, athletes. I know he just had Malika Andrews on the other day, so it's not just the athletes and players, but
Hmm.
shout out to him that we're going to end the show. Before we do that, I want to find out is two things. How you feeling about the Raptors now? Like you said, it's kind of a
Mm.
desert area, and then we'll end off with a little bit of a game I like to say. Did he play for them?
Oh,
I don't know if you paid attention to the TNT off season when it comes back. They asked Chuck, like, Chuck, who he play for? I did a remix. Did he play for them? So I'm gonna mention some players, and you gotta let me know if they played for the Raptors or not.
okay.
But
Woo.
before we get to that, how
Hmm.
are you feeling about the Raptors now and this new era of the Grady Dicks, the RJ Barretts, Emmanuel Quickly.
Yeah.
How are you feeling about this current state of the Raptors?
Okay. So I'm of two minds. One because personal, of my employment there, so I'm gonna have some biases, both for and against. So strictly has a fan. Strictly has a fan. Um, it's difficult. So my son's 12. The Raptors have been in the playoffs the majority of my son's life. So when I put it into that kind of context, there are fans love winning, right? And I get it. That's what makes the sport fun. Sports are fun when teams are winning.
Yes.
Um, so there's an era of Raptors fan who have only known the Raptors to be a playoff team. They don't know desert. They don't know rebuild from scratch. Um, and for a long time, and for some, the slogan still goes, "In Masai we trust," right? Because he was able to pull some pieces together and got us a ring. I think this era now, first of all, I love that RJ, hometown, plays here. I think that there's something so, like, I'm also a corny girl, right? I love those kinds of storylines. I love that so much, that when he plays at home, he's literally in his yard. Um I love IQ. I saw glimpses when all those triggers were pulled, and was like, okay, what's happening and who's who and what's what. Spicy barbecue, as it was called. So that was Pascal, Barnes, Quickly, and Barrett. And now it's just barbecue because we let go of the spice. Um, and seeing Grady develop. Shout out to his mom, who's also a very lovely lady. Um, I think that that's one of the biggest joys, is seeing the G League development actually working, because I think, like, with time, like, Grady can be a Demar. um I I think my biggest challenge is, like, I'm also old school. I'm just like, who's our point guard? That's been my question for, like, since Fred left. I'm just like, who is our point guard? I am from the Mighty Mouse, Kyle Lowry, Fred Van Vliet point guard era. Who, who, who is that? And if you tell me it's Scotty Barnes, I'm gonna laugh at you, because I'm just like, I've met that man. He is a tree. He is a large human being. Okay, he is. He's tall, but he is a massive, ginormous human being. I don't associate that with people who, and I mean, yes, in this era, the players are more athletic, but I'm just like, my brain, I'm just like, but who is our point guard? And I think also too, we don't have any elders. I know
Mm,
we have some on the bench, but I need some OGs who are me like, who have a different level of basketball IQ to help guide these youngins on the court. Off the court, whole different story, right? But so I'm trying to be patient with it. Our record does not really, the record kind of lies a little bit, because a lot of the games from this season, like, I think they've lost like 12 games by 7 points or less. And the last few ones that I've watched, not the ones where they just lost by, like, there was like 155 points scored. I'm like, so we just said no defense. We just said no to the defense at total. Cool. Um, so I would say that, yeah, like, there were so many games where we lost by a point or like a basket. Um, the era of, you know, falling behind in the third quarter and then needing the fourth quarter to dig ourselves out of the hole. That's been the bane of my existence as a Raptors fan for a minute. Drives me crazy. So I say that to say, I'm just like, it'll be interesting to see, because of course, like, there's seeing what just happened with Mike Brown in Sacramento. I'm just like, when is Darko going to be on the hot seat? Knowing what I know about the back end, like, is Masai going to be on the hot seat? So I think that it's going to be a minute before we get back to playoff contention Raptors. I think we have the pieces. I think we're just one OG away from it all clicking, and making better decisions. Um, and the whole like, no one likes the NBA this year because everyone's shooting too many threes. I'm just like, I just been yelling rebounds my whole entire life. I'm just like, you can shoot a three, but can someone be under the basket just in case? Just in case. That's all I want, guys. I just want a second chance point. I just want an offensive rebound. Um, so yeah, that's my thoughts and feelings on the 2024-25 Toronto Raptors.
Yeah, I think they do need. I mean, we see it all the time because of where the basketball is going right now in regards of rightfully so. I get it on the aspect of general managers and owners going more younger, but the NBA still does need vets.
Yes.
They still need vets, and then vets that can still play. Maybe you don't play them 30 minutes a game,
Mm,
but like you said, a younger player may not be as apropos to listen to the vet that's on the bench that plays every 4 games, two
mm,
minutes at the end of a blowout.
yeah.
Maybe Masai gives a call. Kings, y'all are completely, utterly ran terribly. I don't know what y'all doing. Y'all want to send Demar back? A piece
Can you
like that. It
imagine?
don't it don't
Yo.
have to be specifically Demar, but a piece like that, a veteran that still can play,
Yeah.
that players are going to respect. He's has skin in the game, and I can still go drop 30 now if I want to.
Mhm.
A player like that mixed with that young nucleus, I think will be perfect. Maybe it's not DeMar. Maybe you try to get a veteran type of point guard
Mhm.
to put everybody in position. All right, Grady, we're gonna get you your shots.
Mhm.
Scotty, we're gonna get you on the fast break. We're gonna get you into certain positions, probably at the elbow. We're gonna mix in, making sure quickly, hey, you could take over some of the times too. RJ, he's been playing real
Listen,
good back in
RJ has
Toronto.
been like, he's just like, I'm gonna get these points, okay? And I love it. I'm like, it's definitely, but you're not wrong. I think like, um the storyline of a Kyle or a Demar coming back would be, the city would lose its everlasting mind. Um has And I would be one of those people, me, the city. But yeah, I and that's the thing, like, I think also too, and I mean, I don't even know how long this podcast is supposed to be, so my apologies if it was supposed to be
You
30 minutes.
good.
But I think like when we talk about the game, and Jesse started talking about this too, and then created a thread where we were talking about it on threads, is um we have to also talk about men's college basketball in that system, right? Like, how long are players really giving themselves an opportunity to develop, before they leap to the league? Now, NIL might keep them in college a little bit longer, so maybe this era might circle back to longevity in the collegiate level. Um, and so I think that is part. And I'm just like, who are the vets? I'm just like, we can't rely on like the Steph Currys and the Kevin Durant's and LeBrons forever. They are going to retire at some point, much to Adam Silver's chagrin. Okay. But okay, but who's next? And I know
Mhm.
we keep having that conversation, and not next in the who's the next LeBron, because I don't we're not gonna have a next LeBron. Like, no, it's not going. Someone playing for a gajillion years is just not going to be the case. They're gonna have so many competing interests. They don't have to play. Um, they're not gonna want to play. I think like the drive to to last that long, I think is very different. Um, I'm just like, but who are the vets? Like, who are the current vets that a Masai could call up and be like, hey, okay, you probably, got 2, 3 more years before you're kind of considering, hanging them up. Come join us north of the border, where we got great shawarma. I don't know. So it'll be interesting.
Definitely, yeah, definitely something that has to be looked at, and that's an episode in itself. So we're not even going to dive into
Nope.
it in the college aspect of having that because it's such a weird dichotomy where it's like you come in as an 18-year-old super raw, clear evident holes in your game, but
Mm,
you're going to get drafted high because we see there's a ceiling. But the player, like a Jaime Jaquez, who,
mm,
hey, I was there for 3 years. Oh no, we don't want to draft him. Drops and immediately though has an impact though.
right.
It's such a it's such a weird dichotomy, and I get it on the front office aspect because, like you said, Masai might be on the hot seat because they don't get that much. At least depending on what team
Right.
you on, some
Yep.
owners don't care about winning. Some owners are like, hey, all right, we sucked last year. Next year, championship.
Mm,
The patience of the sport in general. That's the bigger macro conversation of,
yes.
are we going to have patience to let them develop, to let the
Mm,
coach implement a system, to let them see, all right, which is why I love the Celtics. They let's take our time with it.
yep.
The Spurs, Pop's been there before I was born. Like certain organizations that
Yeah.
have it set up of understanding it's not going to happen overnight.
Yep.
Have that patience and not be rushing because sometimes you rush and those players go elsewhere
Yep.
and flourish. Ending off, did he
Mhm.
play for them?
Okay.
First name, John Sally.
Yes.
95-96 season. Yes, he was on that first ever team. Aaron McKee,
No.
2 for 2.
Bam.
Del Curry,
Yes.
3 for 3. Quentin Richardson,
No.
4 for 4. See, you catching
Bam.
you catching
Bam.
up for the
Bam.
trivia. You here with
Bam.
it.
Bam.
Hakeem Olajuwon.
I'm gonna go. This one I'm actually not entirely sure of because there was a point in his career where he like tail end he moved, and then people just like randomly would be on the Raptors for like a minute and then they'd be gone. So I'm gonna go with no, but I'm not actually feeling confident about that. No.
He played his last season of his career in a Toronto Raptors jersey.
See, he's literally one of those examples where you're just like, what in the hell? We had a Keem on our team, like guys. Uh,
61. He played 61 games for the Raptors that final season, averaged about like 7 and 5. Obviously, the tail end of his career, but
yes.
like you said, that's one of those like, wait, Hakeem was in a Raptors jersey?
Uh,
Yes.
I clearly, you put me on Jeopardy, I would have lost all the monies.
Jalen Rose.
Yes.
Yes. Jalen Rose was there. Al Harrington.
No.
All right, so far you only got Hakeem wrong.
Okay.
Jermaine O'Neal.
Oh, see again. This is a Hakeem situation all over again. Uh, I'm gonna go. I'm gonna. I'm gonna go with no.
He played
Dang it!
2008, 2009 season, 41 games. Mark Gasol,
Yes.
right? To end off, for you to be 8 of 10, if you get this correct. Tim Hardaway Jr.,
Tim Hardaway Jr. No.
correct. You got that one.
Yes.
8 out of 10.
Okay,
And it was
I'll take
funny.
it.
I
That's
was
an A
doing
in
it.
Canada. Okay, 80% is an A in the school system, so I'm gonna take it.
Oh, shoot. I should have went to school in Canada. I would have had straight A's. I'd have been lit. What?
There you
I
go.
would have had straight A's. That's crazy. But I was doing my research. It's very interesting. Y'all had a lot of the players that's in the NBA now. You had a lot of their fathers was on their team. Del
Yes,
Curry. I think Gary Trent Sr. played for the Raptors for at one point. Like
yes. Met
a
him.
lot of the
Delightful,
fathers,
delightful man.
a lot of the fathers played for the Raptors. It's like, oh wow, this is
But that's the
real.
thing. Like we were this thoroughfare of a team, right? We were this use a Toronto Raptor player to, you know what I mean, these three-way trades and like all these things. Cause like thinking about, I'm just like, these are like Jalen Rose and Akeem Olajuwon and Jermaine O'Neal, like those are not slouches in their individual careers. But for me as a Raptors fan to be like, ugh, and the ones I wasn't confident on is because it was one of those things where they were here, but you're not in the same era of like social media and the
Mhm.
news is everywhere, right? Like there was a point, because to end off, like hockey is king in this country, right? It's a quintessential Canadian sport, even though lacrosse is the national sport. It's weird. We don't want to talk about it. But hockey is king. And so for the early era of Raptors, it wasn't covered on in the newspapers. It was not taken seriously. It was not you know what I mean? Like so to have a player like Hakeem, it probably was written about and then it was castaway because again, it was just like, it's a that's what it was. It was a whole bunch of castaways of, players who were on the tail end, didn't want to stop playing, but had no other options and came here for a minute before they either went off someplace else or officially retired. And so I think like that's, I'm just like, shout out to me because I knew that those ones were kind of, I was kind of like, "Ugh, ugh." In my brain, I'm like, okay, I remember Hakeem in Houston out. I'm just like, I'm trying to like envision it. And I'm just like, yes, it makes sense. But that's just the story of the Toronto Raptors. And, we'll see what the next chapter holds.
For sure. Definitely, we appreciate you hopping on with us, taking time out your schedule. For those that's watching, that's listening, and later on the playback, like, subscribe, share with any and everybody. I tell y'all all the time, you can share it with your uncle, your cousin, share it with the person in jail that's not supposed to have a cell phone. Share it with them too. They don't like this content. Definitely, y'all know the vibes here on the Bench Mob. If you stay ready, you don't got to get ready. The Bench Mob, we out. Peace.